So the final part of that last pasuk of Tzei Lamad, about how HaKadosh Baruch Hu redeemed us from Mitzrayim, is probably the most baffling part. It's probably the most difficult part to understand. Because that final word, mofsim, Vayotzienu Hashem Elokeinu Misham B'yad Chazakah. So Yad Chazakah is associated by the Bal Hagadah as Dever. Vizra Netuya, so that's a cherev. And I talked about the warfare, the figurative war, the 10 makos being aligned as military strategy, or the actual literal war of the firstborn. Uvimara Gadol, HaKadosh Baruch Hu descended into Mitzrayim because he loved us so much, and even in Egypt, which was so full of death and destruction and idolatry, HaKadosh Baruch Hu descends. Uve'osos, so the osos Chazal says mata. They associate the word osos with mata, the decentralization of Moshe, the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu prepared all the makos from Sheshi Simei Bereshis, according to the Rambam. But then that final phrase, this is the final word of the final pasuk. This is the end, effectively, of Tzei Lamad. One could say the end of the actual Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. We're about to start Dayenu. We're about to eat the matzah the Morah, translate the discussion into experience, into eating and drinking and saying Hallel. So this is the end. The final part of the pasuk. V'yatzienu Hashem Elokeinu Misham B'yad Chazakah Uvizra Netuya Uvimara Gadol Uviosos Uvimofsim. How does the hagadah interpret mofsim? Blood, zehadam. It's stupefying. Mofsim, zehadam. We're at the end of the makos. We're at the end of the story. Dam was the first. We've already discussed Dever and Zerah Neturia and the Cherev and Yiras Hashem and Shechina and back to Dam. And the pasuk, which the Haggadah quotes to convince us that the word mofsim in Kisava refers to Dam, is a pasuk in Yoel. In Yoel, Paragimel, the Tanakh describes the apocalypse. How will you know that the apocalypse has begun? You'll walk out one day and you'll see the heavens will be filled of blood, fire, and smoke. Dam, Va'esh, V'simros Ashan. V'nasati mofsim, Hashem says, I'll put mofsim b'shamayim uva'aretz, both on the earth, but more spectacularly in the heavens. Dam, Va'esh, V'simros Ashan. Fire, blood, and smoke. What is going on? Well, what is the fire in the heavens and the smoke and the blood in the heavens? What does that apocalyptic vision of Yoel have to do with Yitzias Mitzrayim? We're all very busy when we say Dam Va'esh V'simros Ashan, taking the wine out and dripping Dam Va'esh V'simros Ashan. But what does that have to do with Yitzias Mitzrayim? Why does the word Mofsim mean Dam? It's an absolutely staggering question that very few people really have the time to dwell on because we're rushing so quickly to make it through the Seder. So the truth is, the Haggadah is probably based on a medrash. It's a beautiful medrash, in Psikta de Rav Kahana. And the medrash is, let me just pull it up here, the medrash is describing the fact that the Geula of Mitzrayim is a template for future Geula. Whatever happened in Mitzrayim will happen again, but not just in general, that we'll be redeemed as we were, but the exact detail of Yitzias Mitzrayim, the exact detail of Yud Makos, 10 plagues, will repeat itself when we're finally redeemed lasted level. Because so much of Geula is faith, and so much of faith is deja vu. I've been here before. I know this is true because it's happening again, because it happened before, and I can take that leap even though it doesn't make sense, and even though I don't understand it, but it's happened before, and it's happening again. That's why the night of Pesach is referred to as Leil Shimurim. It's a template. It's a night which is reserved, which is preserved for a future recall, for future invocation. So the Medrash reads as follows. It's a very interesting Medrash. Just like in Mitzrayim there was blood, similarly there'll be some type of blood, not exactly blood from the Nile, but something like blood when HaKadosh Baruch Hu redeems us from Edom, the final Geula. And how do we know that there'll be blood, just like there was in Mitzrayim during the final Geula? The pasuk in Yoel, our pasuk. V'nasati mofsim b'shamayim u'va'aretz, I'll put signs in the heavens and the earth. Dam Va'esh V'simros Ashan. And then the Medrash continues, just like in Mitzrayim there was Tzvardeya, similarly, when we're finally redeemed from Edom, there'll be Tzvardeya. And it puts a pasuk in Yeshaya. Not exactly Tzvardeya, but something similar, sound-making, loud noises. And then the Medrash continues, just as there was Kinim in Mitzrayim, there'll be something similar, analogous to Kinim, Liasid Lavo. And it quotes a pasuk in Yeshaya. Just like it was Arov in Mitzrayim, similarly in Edom, Arov. It quotes this time a pasuk from, again, Yishai. Just like there was Dever, similarly Asid Lav will be Dever. This time it quotes a pasuk from Yechezkel. 10 makos will recur, and 10 psukim to prove that they'll recur, not exactly in the same way they occurred in Mitzrayim, but something similar. So 10 makos and 10 psukim. Because what happened in Mitzrayim will be repeated point for point. Le'asid Lav. That's what Gula is about, Emunah. The Haggadah is quoting this medrash. The last word of the last pasuk in Parshas Kisavo, that last pasuk of the 4, Mofsim, tells us that these miracles and makos were not just one-time off events, but they were Mofsim, they were omens, precursors, harbingers. They will occur again. They're not just makos, they're Mofsim. And the Haggadah says, Mofsim means zehadam, there's one word missing from the Haggadah, etc., etc., etc. When the Haggadah writes, Uvemofsim zehadam, it means dam, svardeya, kinim, arov. It just quotes one makkah and one pasuk, zehadam, shenemar, v'nasati mofsim b'shamayim v'aretz dam v'esh v'simros hashan. But it means dam, shenemar, v'nasati mofsim, svardeya, shenemar, the pasuk in Yeshaya, kinim, shenemar, the pasuk in Yeshaya. The words that's missing from the Haggadah are etc., etc. The Haggadah is trying to tell us that all these 10 makos that we've read about, that we've questioned, that we've elaborated, that we've thought about, they didn't just happen once, they can happen again. And this is a segue. There's a transition from the first part of the Haggadah, remembering Yetzias Mitzrayim, to the second part of the Haggadah, thinking about future Geula, Nirtza, Hallel, moving into the second part of the evening. So this is the transition point. Dam va'esh v'simros hashan is not a specific pasuk about blood. It's the first pasuk the Medrash quotes to tell us that the first makkah will reoccur, and all other makkos will reoccur. And those are the words that are missing. The word mofis means an omen. When we get to the end of Tzei Olamad, that last word, the last pasuk in Tzei Olamad of Arami Ovid Avi Mofsim, zehadam, it doesn't mean dam. It means zehadam, tzvardeya, akinim, arav, dever, shchen, shenemar, v'nasati Mofsim, proving that dam will occur. Pasuk in Yeshaya, proving that tzvardeya will occur. Pasuk in Yeshaya, kinim, pasuk in Yeshaya, arav, pasuk in Yechezkel, dever. The Haggadah can't quote the entire medrash. The Haggadah has to be brief, so it just quotes zehadam, but it doesn't mean dam. It means all the makos. So these are the 5 phrases of that pasuk. Yad chazaka, zoha dever. A quick summary. Why dever? Because dever trained the Egyptians to realize that Hashem isn't physical. The Yad Hashem is not physical, but it's something you can't see, like dever, or ultimately makas b'charas. Mizrah Netriya, zoha cherev. The outstretched arm, the sword. Why a sword? Because 10 plagues were makos, were warfare. The makos were arranged as war to convince the people that Hashem was a warrior, could lead them into battle. And ultimately, there was a civil war, an actual war that erupted that night based on HaKadosh Baruch Hu was intervening in Egyptian politics. Over Mara Gadol, Zogi Leshchin, Hashem descended into Mitzrayim the first time in history, even though Mitzrayim was a cemetery full of idolatry, because He loved us so deeply, He could be no other place. Uvi also, Zehamate, the staff decentralizes Moshe. He's not his miracles, it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the staff, or Moshe are just conduits. At least according to the Rambam, the staff was created, according to the Mishnah in Avos, during Sheshis and Me'Bereshis, because it was already pre-capacitated with all the miracles. Because miracles are not HaKadosh Baruch Hu intervening in nature, but rather pre-planning it. And finally, Mofsim, Haggadah says Adam, it doesn't mean Dam. Mofsim means that all the miracles and all the events of Geula will occur again in Mirz Hashem. And the Makos is like a roadmap for us to realize that Geula is about to begin as we see each of the Makos unfolding in some similar fashion. Chag Kasher v'Samech.